Hello and welcome. This is Marjorie Saulson of Vibrant Vocal Power with this edition of Public Speaking Tips and Tricks. And as promised, I'm going to be speaking about 3 tips to do with great introductions. Now, I'd like to make it clear what type of introduction I'm talking about. I'm not talking about when you're introducing yourself to somebody socially or at a networking event. I'm talking about an introduction when you are giving a speech or a presentation. And there's 3 things I'd like to talk about. Number 1, what needs to be in the introduction. Number 2, who has to ideally perform the introduction, as it were. And 3, what to do if that ideal person can't do it. So first of all, the purpose of an introduction before you speak is to get the audience totally excited about you and what you're bringing to the table. And I'd like to welcome Lou Bortoni, who's just joined us. Welcome, Lou. The thing is that you have certain areas of expertise and you are authority in certain areas. And it's important that the audience know about this. And so the introduction needs to mention perhaps honors you've received, accolades, the purpose of what you do and whom you serve and the benefits you bring to people, sort of a elevator pitch of your value. And to welcome you to the stage so that everybody's very excited to see you. So those 2 things, mentioning your expertise, getting the audience excited, and the 3rd one, of course, welcoming you to the stage so that you can gracefully appear, those 3 things are really important. Now, who should give this? I was just working with one of my clients the other day, and we were working on her signature speech. And when I work with somebody about something, I like it to be in their voice, not my voice. So we always start with something that my client has written. And then we go through it and spiff it up, so to speak, but still in my client's voice. And she started out talking about her expertise. And I told her that this was not her job. This was the job of the person who's introducing her. And there's a couple of reasons to give somebody else the job, mainly probably the program organizer. First of all, it's an opportunity for the program organizer to brag about you, and by implication, that means that that person was a wonderful program organizer because they got such a great person to come and make a presentation. So in a way, inviting the program organizer to do it is a very gracious thing to do and makes that person look good. The other reason to have somebody else go through your expertise is when you start out a talk saying, I did this and I've accomplished this and my goal is this and I, 2 things happen. Number 1, chances are you could come across as a egotistical, self-centered braggart. All those things may be true, but if somebody else says them, it's one thing. When you start talking about your expertise, instead of just showing it off in your talk, you come across poorly. And it turns your audience off even before you started speaking. And the other problem with you starting out with that is it violates one of the worst of the, it commits one of the worst presentation crimes there is. When you start listing everything that you do and bring to the table, it is boring. And the last thing you want to do is start boring your audience, because you need to start out with a smasheroo start, which is a whole other topic. But having the person who is introducing you list all of your expertise and then what you do and how you serve people, and please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sally Jones. It's a very graceful way for you to start, and then you can jump right in. You don't even say thank you, by the way. You jump right in with your grabber question or sentence or joke or whatever. So you immediately get the audience's attention. Now, one thing to remember about this introduction is who writes it, not the person doing it. You write it. You know your areas of expertise. You know what you want people to know about you. You write it. When you're discussing all of the details of the event ahead of time with the organizer, which is a whole other topic again, you mentioned you're going to send an email a copy, and you bring a copy with you in large print, preferably on a clipboard so it's easy to hold. And when you get there, part of what you do, along with introducing yourself to the organizer and letting them know, oh, thank God my speaker showed up, is you hand them the introduction on the clipboard and ask them if they would please read over it for a minute to see if there's anything that they want to ask you about. Basically, you want them to practice it at least once. And hopefully you don't throw in any tricky lingo from your field, because I once was introduced by somebody that I could tell dyslexia runs in my family, and I could tell that this person was dyslexic, and this person had a real hard time reading my introduction that I had given to him, even though it was in large print. So I have learned from that mistake to check with the person, are they comfortable reading what I have provided? And that's kind of a delicate dance. Is there some, you maybe want to ask ahead of time, do you want to introduce me? I'm going to have a written introduction, or is there somebody else that you prefer to do it? If you arrange that ahead of time, that is just one more detail you don't have to think about. And that introduction, given by somebody who's excited to have you there and invite you up, inviting everybody to give you a warm welcome, sets the appropriate tone. And I see we have some other guests with us. Oh, Oh, Lou had to say, yes, let others sing your praises. And oh yes, and Lou, another question. You said, I was told that the speaker should never do housekeeping items. Is that true? Absolutely true. Any housekeeping you do is done ahead of time. And by the way, that's one of the things I work with my clients and I teach about in my course. Always know what to say, communicate with clarity and confidence, because those things are really important. I also mentioned it in my complimentary ebook, which I'll mention to you before we finish. So anyway, there you are with this wonderful written introduction in large print. I do a minimum 14-point font and space and a half, not single space, space and a half, so it's easy for the person to read it. And that person gives a wonderful introduction. You give your wonderful talk. Afterward, you go up and thank the person who introduced you for doing a wonderful job, and you get your clipboard with your introduction back if they haven't left it on the rostrum for you. And then that is the ideal way to be introduced when you are doing a presentation. Now, what happens if in some instances you have to introduce yourself? Now, I'm going to give you two examples. One, using myself. I have to actually introduce myself in a video that I need to make sometime in the next week or so. I'm part of Alina Vincent's Rising Stars program, and each of us is invited to introduce ourselves at her upcoming event. And seeing I can't attend, I have to do it not live, but on video, so you better believe I'm going to work hard on it. So how do I do this? My advice to you is, if you have to introduce yourself and say what you do, start out with something a little surprising or a little humorous. And it's my plan to, they're using these introductions, by the way, at the beginning of each new session to get the people back in the room. So I'm thinking of starting out with, say, Hi, and welcome from Motown, also known as Motortown or Detroit, the comeback city. Because everybody knows the word Motown, what they may not know is it actually is an abbreviation for Motortown. It was not invented as a name by Barry Gordon when he created the Motown sound. The sound actually is a Detroit sound, and we are the car city or Motortown or Motown. So I thought that would be an amusing way to start off and get everybody's attention. The other example I'd like to give you is my absolute most favorite example of somebody introducing himself with such humor and grace. And this goes back to John F. Kennedy when he was president of the United States. And he had a wonderful sense of humor. And it just so happened he and his wife, Jacqueline, made an official trip to Paris. And the French went gaga over Jacqueline. She was a woman of such grace and elegance and class. And of course, her maiden name was Bouvier, so her family came from France. So she was like the epitome of French style as far as they were concerned. And everywhere they went, they made a bigger fuss over Jacqueline than they made over the president of the United States, who was arguably the most powerful person in the world. And so when JFK started an address that he was giving, a formal address, this is how he started it. He said, "I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris." And the whole audience just broke up laughing and were totally disarmed. And he was a brilliant speaker anyway. But if you need to introduce yourself sometime, if you can do it with some type of humor, that will help, cover the fact that you're talking about what you do. And it's better if you don't go into a whole long list. If you go into your remarks and start sharing things and kind of intersperse, when I was doing this, I learned that, and I was working with this client, and this was the issue, and we worked on this, and allow your expertise to kind of, well, the Israelis invented something called drip irrigation. It's used in the desert where the water just disappears, and it's like when you have a hose and it just has little holes. It's called drip irrigation. If you kind of use drip information about this, that, and the other. And for example, I was awarded the accolade of the top public speaking coach of the year by the International Association of Top Professionals, which is a huge honor. And I was invited to give their keynote address. So I could, in a sort of offhand way, say, well, when I was giving the keynote address at the annual gala of the International Association of Top Professionals, this is how I handled it. So you kind of slip it in edgewise. That's one way that you can kind of sneak in some of your expertise, but it's got to really fit what you're talking about. It can't seem phony or you're dropping name dropping, as it were, which doesn't go across very well. Let's see if we have any more comments or questions. Yeah, Lou was saying, yes, let others sing your praises. Right. Oh, Lou says he loves the JFK story. If any of you have problems handling questions and answers and want to see a master, take a look at JFK's press conferences. They are brilliant. And it shows you how somebody can handle difficult questions with grace. And the interesting thing about his press conferences, he would always end by asking one particular journalist to offer her a question, and she would always give him some type of softball question that he was able to answer with great humor. And it was a wonderful way to conclude all of his press conferences. Anytime you can use humor in your remarks, it's very engaging, and it it makes you very relatable to your audience. And so just to sum up what I've been sharing about when you're introduced, you want the introduction to include the things that make clear your authority status and your credentials. You want it to make clear the type of service you offer and what benefits that service provides. And you want that introduction to get the audience really excited to hear you. And you want somebody else to do it, so you don't come across as a braggart who's always saying, I did this, and I did that, and I did this, and I did that. Because all of that turns people off, and as I mentioned earlier, it is boring. And the last thing you want to do is start out remarks with boring your audience, because it is very difficult, if not impossible, to get them back again. So ideally, you have a typed large print introduction. You email it to the organizer ahead of time. You double check who is going to actually read it, and then you bring a copy of it, again in large print, on a clipboard, so it's easy for the person to hold it, especially if there's no rostrum for them to put it down on. And actually, they can hold the clipboard at any level where they can read it easily, because sometimes the rostrum is low and people are going like this to read something, which and whenever you do that, by the way, your voice does not pick up well on the microphone. That's another thing I help people with. How do you take glances at your notes without dropping your chin and your voice and losing your place? That's a whole other topic. Anyway, this is Marjorie Saulson from Vibrant Vocal Power. I'd love for you to make some comments, add them to Lou's when you watch this video, and let me know if there's some other topics you'd like me to cover. And I invite you to take a look at my complimentary ebook. There's actually a whole section in there about what to do to prepare for giving a talk, the things you need to take with you, prepare ahead of time, and the things you need to take with you, and what you need to do when you're there. And you can access that free report. It's a complimentary ebook. It's on my website, vibrantvocalpower.com. It's on the right-hand side of the page, and it also pops up in your face when you've been there for a little bit. And I invite you to take a look at that ebook, because it has, the subtitle is 10 Powerful Pathways to Overcome Your Public Speaking Fears, even if you have struggled with them for years. And when I expanded it from a 3-page report to a 23-page ebook, I did end up adding an 11th pathway, how to get your nerves to serve you instead of sabotage you. And if you're one of those people who gets really nervous when you have to start talking to other people, whether it's giving a speech or networking or on the phone, that pathway you may find very helpful. So thank you for joining me. And thank you, Lou, for joining me live. I truly appreciate it. And he says, have a nice night. Have a nice night, day, or morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you happen to be watching this. Bye-bye.